Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to have you all here today. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. This month, we're going to be focusing on staying strong and healthy for the new year. I can't believe it's December 1st, and it's just crazy. So my name is Sarah Kurtz, and I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight, we're talking about emerging wellness research, so I'm really excited to hear from our presenters tonight. And this is actually our last program of 2021. I cannot believe that we are here. We did so much this year. You guys did so much work this year, so we're so glad that we're going to be starting off in 2022, hitting the road, and we're going to have some great new offerings for you guys. So we've included the next webinar. So we're really excited to continue this, and we'll have some new special webinars and some new coaching series offered throughout 2022. So we hope that you will join us again in 2022. Do know that you need to re-register for the entire year of webinars for 2022 since your registration was only for 2021. So make sure you head over to our website and do that. You can also now, starting in 22, register for the entire year of Jumpstart and our Your Questions Answered program. So you can register for all three of those for the whole year on our website. So we hope that you will head over to our website and do that tonight. All right, so how to ask questions. Just a little bit of housekeeping items. We're going to have about 20 minutes at the end of the webinar for Q&A. If you have a question during the presentation, you can type it into the questions box on your control panel. We are recording this so that you can access the archived recording of this presentation on our website. So that'll be up on the website tomorrow. So we also do have a few additional handouts available that are corresponding to this material. So we have an article and copies of the slides in your handout section on your control panel. So feel free to check that out. Okay, so our presenters tonight, we have Kathy Zakowski, who's the Senior Director of Research at the National MS Society. Dr. Zakowski received her PhD in movement science from Washington University and then joined the faculty of the Departments of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation of Neurology at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and Kennedy Krieger Institute, where she ran a laboratory for 15 years before starting with the National MS Society. She's also an occupational therapist with over 25 years of clinical expertise in adult rehabilitation, having an MS practice for over 15 years. So lots of knowledge here tonight. And up next, we have Ms. Raz Kalb. Raz is a clinical psychologist who's specialized in MS care and support and education for over 40 years. And she is one of our senior programs consultants here at CanDo. So we're just so thrilled that she is able to join us tonight and share all of her knowledge with us. And last but not least, we have Ms. Mandy Rohrig. She's a physical therapist that specializes in rehabilitation of individuals with neurological disorders with an emphasis of treatment of individuals with MS and balance and vestibular disorders. She's also one of our senior programs consultants here at CanDo MS and also the manager of patient advocacy at Bridge Bio Gene Therapy. So she's also actively involved in the MS community in her hometown of Omaha. She regularly consults and presents among local MS exercise and support groups. So really engaged group tonight. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Kathy, who's going to tee us up for what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I'm just going to kind of run through what Roz and Mandy and I have kind of developed as our learning objectives. So we hope these are the things you'll get as we finish our program here. So we're hoping that we will be able to summarize some recent findings on diet, pain, and tools for everyday life. We're also going to, we're hoping you'll be able to list at least 3 pandemic growth tips for people with MS. We hope that you will be able to also describe the way that depression and vascular health conditions interact in MS. And last but not least, we hope you'll be able to describe the benefits of exercise, including high intensity interval training called HIIT training for people with MS. So that seems like a tall order for 40 minutes of our talking. So please be sure and ask questions afterwards to make sure we're clear. We can go to the next slide. So I'm going to start. I thought that what I wanted to do is kind of share with you some new research. Most of it is in MS, but some of it is not, and I'll point that out. And I just thought maybe talking about sort of tools and gadgets that you might not have thought about before would be interesting to you, and give you a sense of, you know, wellness research is not you know, the same everywhere. There's a pretty big variety of the types of research. So I'll start with this idea of an electronic pill bottle. So there have been studies where electronic pill bottles have shown a measurable impact to improve someone's adherence to stay on target and self-manage their taking of their medications. And this has been used with other patient groups, for example, for high blood pressure, for kidney transplant, for example. But the research team here thought that, you know, well, MS is a little different from other chronic conditions, given it has often a direct impact on cognition, on your dexterity of your hands, making it hard to open bottles, and even just overall physical functioning. So Dr. Mateen at Harvard conducted a pilot randomized trial. It was virtual, given COVID, right, of a smartphone-based electronic pill bottle. So, and they were monitoring how consistently did people take their medications when they were given reminders, and when with this electronic pill bottle, and when they just got regular reminders. So let me tell you a little bit about this bottle. So it has a smart cap that tracks when the bottle is opened. It syncs to an application on your cell phone, where people can actually view their pill taking events, so when they took their medication. And if you don't take your pill when you're supposed to, it sends all kinds of reminders. It blinks lights, it can send texts, it makes a phone call to you to remind you this is the time to take your to take your medication. And it has a 1-year replaceable battery, and it comes with a kind of a child-resistant cap. So it's openable to you as an adult, but not for children. So the goal of this study was to gather information on how consistently people would adhere to taking their medication and why people might drop out. And the results showed that people with MS who received these medication reminders had a higher optimal adherence. Not shocking, right? You would think if I keep getting reminded, I will do better with this. But what I thought was interesting is that they described too that people who did not adhere, it was a little bit more nuanced. So it wasn't just that they forgot. Some of them didn't have, you know, some of them really appreciated the reminders because it helped motivate them to take their medication. So I think the idea here was really to understand, if people are not taking their medication, why is that? And can we develop strategies to improve adherence? Because it is really important, right? Medications have a half-life. So they come into the bloodstream and they are at their optimal level for a period, and then it starts to decline. And that's why you must take, medication on the schedule that's set out for you. So I just thought this was an interesting way to approach that simple problem of making sure that someone takes their medications. And given the different issues with memory and cognition that go with MS, I can see where this could be an issue for some people. So I wanted to share that study. And I think more studies need to be done, but this was a small study, but it did allow us to better understand that getting these medication reminders was a positive way to stay on track. I also wanted to talk a little bit about light therapy. So just as kind of a reminder, fatigue, is a really common symptom in MS. And some people with MS report it to be the most disabling of all MS symptoms, right? It really affects so many different facets of a person's life. And, you know, there are medications that you can take, but mostly they're for other issues like depression or other medical conditions. And so, you know, I would say in Can-Do, right, we focus a lot on the non-pharmacologic treatments for MS fatigue, you know, doing your exercise and staying more fit. There's some cognitive behavioral therapy you can do, and there are educational programs. But one study in MS found that even just higher sunlight exposure was correlated with reduced fatigue. Now, just as a caveat, that was done in Tasmania, and many of us don't live in a place with excessive sunlight, so that might not be as accessible. So this group wanted to test out a bright white light therapy. So it is exposure to a broad spectrum light repeatedly over time, and it has been shown to reduce fatigue in individuals with seasonal affective disorder and Parkinson's disease, and even cancer-related fatigue. In this study, they did a small randomized controlled trial where people were exposed to this bright white light for an hour twice a day. So it sort of sits next to your computer, for example, or it could sit next to your desk or somewhere, so you're not staring into it, but it's accessible to your eyes. And so there were two groups. One group had a bright white light and one group had a dim red light. And they did this for 4 weeks, twice a day for an hour. And they had 41 people with MS participate, and the results showed that both groups improved in their reported fatigue. So this provides kind of phase 2 trial data that light therapy is feasible and safe, and it was well tolerated in people with MS. So I wanted to share this, even though it's not so exciting in the fact that both lights made a difference, but to kind of share with you that I think even these kinds of results are really important to report on. So the authors think that this is possible, this might be possible because, you know, the red light posed a placebo effect, for example, or it's possible that, you know, because people were in the study at all, they changed their life habits as a result of the guidance to be in that study, and that improved their fatigue. So there needs to be more work done in this area, but you know, it's a non-invasive way of approaching a treatment for fatigue with very, you know, I can't think of really a negative side effect other than maybe the cost of buying the device. So I wanted to share that as an idea, especially given that we're going into winter, and I think people with MS do suffer from seasonal affective disorder too. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to share this augmented white cane. So it's for people with impaired vision. So it's not specific to MS, but people with MS often have impaired vision. And it improves a person's ability to navigate because it uses these new techniques. So it's essentially a high-tech white cane that has been used for years, right? So researchers at Stanford developed this new innovative version of the familiar white cane that people that are visually impaired use to help them get around. And the experimental device uses a light detection and ranging sensing technology. So those are kind of fancy words just to say it has a camera, it has a GPS system, and it even has this inertial movement sensor to help the cane understand where it is in the environment. So not only will it give you information that you don't want to step off the sidewalk, but it also give you it'll give you audio cues to help direct you from one place to the next. So in testing, this is very new too. I just read about this this fall. So in testing, this augmented cane helped both visually impaired and sighted participants because it increased their walking speed, while even people who have vision but were blindfolded found the device very, very helpful. I think the idea is it gives you maybe some confidence so that you can get out of your house and walk around. And that gets to the exercise portion that you're going to hear Mandy talk about later. That gives you a way to be able to do that. So this again hasn't been tested in MS, but it could offer kind of a promising way for people with MS who are using canes because of impaired vision to be able to get out of the house and do a little bit more. So we'll see if it comes, if this comes out as a, a product that is accessible to everybody. I don't know the cost. It's just in testing right now, but I thought it was kind of fun and a different way of approaching your basic cane, and even not even thinking about the cane as a way of giving you support for walking, but as a cane for giving you the confidence and support you need for moving around when you can't see very well. We can go to the next slide. This is my last little gadget that I wanted to share, and I think some of you may have seen this next one. Okay, this is called the ALinker. It is a modified walker, and what I think is really interesting about this is it doesn't really look like a walker, but it gives you a lot of stability because it has 3 wheels. It's not motorized, and essentially you walk while you're in it so that you have a place to sit very easily. It doesn't have any pedals. It has an adjustable saddle so that that seat can move up and down to fit your height. And the handlebars and brakes on the handles give you the sense that a lot of us have ridden a bike before, and it's a little bit more familiar than using a cane that might not feel as comfortable to someone who doesn't want to use a walker, but really needs a walker. So I think I would like to encourage people to look for tools and gadgets like this that can be used to give you some added independence and freedom in a safe way. The ALinker, I think I've talked to people with MS who use it and they love it because it allows them, for example, to take walks with their loved one at night because they can stop and rest wherever they are. And you can do that with a regular walker, but this makes people feel more enabled in the real world to get around. I've actually been to other presentations I've given where someone walked in with an ALinker and just sat and listened to my presentation, and then when it was done, got up and walked away. And I just think it has kind of a nice a visual for people, and I think it's a safe way to use a walker type help. All right, so I'm going to move on now to another area, not thinking about gadgets, but just thinking about what I think my patients have talked a lot about, and that is that there's pain with MS, and the fact that we're all aging with MS too, and we know that MS itself, the pathology, can cause pain, but that keep in mind that people with MS can have pain from other sources, right? And that's just aging, we get more aches and pains. I get more aches and pains in my hips and my back than I did when I was younger. And so adding sort of on top of that, the MS pathology, really, I want people to be aware that pain should be, it is expected that there would be some, right? So, but regardless of the source of the pain, whether it's through the MS or just from your body being tired after so many years, if it's getting in the way of your function or negatively impacts your quality of life, it needs to be addressed. You really can't kind of push through it, for example, or if you ignore it, often the problems just get worse. So I really encourage you to address it. And I think there are ways to address it. So there are pharmacologic ways that you can address pain. They're not perfect and they have a lot of side effects. So there are also non-pharmacologic ways, including rehabilitation, behavioral interventions that can treat pain and help you do more of what you want to be able to do while you're in less pain. And just to also highlight that chronic pain, so pain that you have for not just situational because you might have done a little bit too much one day, chronic pain typically requires a multimodal approach. So it's not just medications and it's not just behavioral interventions, but really it's a variety of tools that can just improve your pain maybe a little bit, and then another modality can improve it just a little bit more. So you're kind of working on it in that format. So not expecting everything to go away immediately, but understanding that medication and behavioral interventions kind of have equal opportunity. And there are many strategies for managing pain. So I wanted to point out a website tool. It's called My MS Toolkit. It was based on a 2015 trial that the National MS Society funded in part, and there have been follow-up studies. They're headed by Dr. Anna Kratz and Dr. Don Eady, who are pictured here. And the trials demonstrate that there are lots of different ways that you can address pain. So cognitive behavioral therapy, self-management strategies. One strategy for managing pain is relaxation. So building a relaxation or a meditation practice into daily life can sound really intimidating, but this website offers very specific examples and ways that you can go about to try to understand how to do meditation in your own world, in your own life. It can help decrease pain. It relates and related stress that goes with it. And it can be used chronically, every day. That's what not for people say, meditation is really great for. But even if you just do it when you're in pain, I think that would be a step in the right direction. And I just wanted you to have a resource of where to go for that. Okay, we can go to the next slide. I wanted to make sure when we're talking about wellness that I touch on diet and nutrition, because I think lots of people have questions about this. So while many different diets have been proposed as a treatment or cure, the evidence for how effective it is has been really limited. So there really is no perfect MS diet. And that's something that we're still looking at and researching. But most of the proposed diets haven't been subjected to kind of the rigorous controlled studies that we need to know what the important ingredients are in that diet to really affect a pathology. But I think researchers are beginning to make significant connections around diet and exercise. Findings from published. So I wanted to share that the National MS Society is really very engaged in this, and we have a wellness research working group, and within that there is a nutrition and diet subgroup. And so what this group did, one project was just to evaluate the research on diet studies and provide practical information about what was found through those studies. And so that's the website that's shown here. It's one way that I would encourage you to stay up to date on research related to diet. Okay, we can go to the next. Now, Dr. Walls conducted a study that the National MS Society funded, where she was comparing the Swank diet and the Walls modified Paleolithic diet. And she was looking at it to see if it would really reduce fatigue. And so there were two groups of people on the Swank diet and people on the Walls diet. And they subjected themselves to many different tests, lots of different ways of evaluating fatigue and quality of life and cognition. And what they found after a very rigorous study is that both diets affected fatigue. So both diets made it so that people have less fatigue, and people described improvements in their quality of life. There were many that described improvements in information processing speed and walking distance. But their main hypothesis was, can these diets affect fatigue? And what they found is not just one diet, but both of them did. So I find this kind of to be a very important point, because again, although they went in with a single hypothesis, what they found was that two different diets can still affect fatigue. So I still think we're a step in the right direction in terms of what can diet do for symptoms of MS. And I think that we are just on the cusp of getting to more studies that are going to evaluate what are the elements of different diets that can really make an impact on people's lives. So I think that's where I'm stopping, and I'm going to now hand it over to Roz Cobb, who's our resident psychologist, and she can address some mental health issues.
Thanks, Kathy. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation, exciting tools and gadgets and findings. So I want to talk about two studies that I found particularly interesting this year in the mental health field. And I was thinking about this a lot, actually. So the authors of this study, Poley and colleagues, talked about, sort of in the title of their article, if you can't control the wind, adjust your sails. And this is a study related to the pandemic and how out of control all of us have felt during the pandemic. And it was an interview of young adults with MS and what they felt they had gained or learned as a result of these difficult 2 years we've been through. But as I'm talking about this, I want you to think about all the ways that you, living with MS and your support partners, do this all the time. When there are things in your life caused by MS that you can't control, or things have changed in ways that you don't like, you make adjustments and adaptations all the time. So I'm going to talk about this study, but I want you to try and broaden the messages to all the areas of your life where you guys have had to be so creative, so flexible, and so adaptable just to live with an unpredictable illness. So they talked to young adults, ages 18 to 45, a nice wide age span of young adults. And they asked them what benefits or growth experiences they had from this pandemic experience so far. We're still in it. And the three areas that they highlighted were existential growth, growth in relationships, and also personal growth. So, and these young adults came out with recommendations based on their experiences for all of us. So in the area of existential growth, they said that it's important to learn the art of being patient and the value of small, caring gestures. So think about this in your own life. Have you experienced that those small things and big things like patience helped you thrive in spite of what was going on with the pandemic? That when we are forced to slow down, that sometimes allows for unexpected discoveries. Discoveries about ourselves, discoveries about the world, or new things that are of interest to us. That when you let go of control and embrace the fact that you're vulnerable, like we all are. You can go on to the next slide. Sorry, Sarah. That you can discover new positives, right? So as many of you have said in our programs with Can Do, that when you let go of the idea that things have to be exactly the way they were before, you sometimes discover new things in your life that are positive to you. And freedom is really choosing responsibly your own life and wellness. And everybody makes different choices, as we're seeing, but you have the freedom, even in these difficult circumstances, to make choices to care for yourself. Next slide, please. In terms of relationship growth, these young adults found and are now recommending to others that receiving but also giving support helps us move forward, helps us to grow. So we want to make sure in our important relationships that they are reciprocal, that we each feel like we're contributing as well as receiving, and that allows us to thrive. And they also said that it's important that we don't forget or take for granted the affection of the people around us. Sometimes in times of isolation and fear and anxiety, like the pandemic has created for all of us, we forget that we can have these tight support networks. We may have to do them through Zoom, or we may have to do them differently, but we should foster those connections and not ever just take them for granted. They need to be nurtured so that they can grow. Next slide, please. In terms of personal growth, these wise young adults found that they learned strategies, and they encourage us all to learn strategies to take care of ourselves, both body and mind, which really fits in very well with our can-do philosophy of wellness, where in all of our programs we focus on physical, emotional, and cognitive well-being. You have the right to express and satisfy your needs. And I think we've seen this come up in relationships during the pandemic, where people discovered that they had different needs or different priorities sometimes from their close family members or their friends, and they had to actually negotiate how they were going to handle their differences of opinion about how to manage safety during COVID. But it's important that you feel able to express how you feel, what you need, and how you want to work with the people around you to make those things possible. To pursue your own goals with determination. And that's also part of our can-do philosophy. But in COVID, people have had to sometimes reframe their goals, restructure them, think differently, because some things that were possible from before weren't possible during the last 2 years. And so whatever your goals are, to stick to them and pursue them with determination. Recognize your own strengths. Value who you are, what you bring to the table, because whatever you bring is unique. And in valuing that, you feel better about yourself, and therefore you feel better about the world around you. So your strengths need your care and attention. Sometimes in the pandemic, people have experienced a lot of silence and solitude, particularly those who live alone and haven't been able to connect or socialize. And what these young adults came out of the last 2 years feeling was that we have to sometimes embrace silence and solitude and not be frightened of it. Because if we can let ourselves engage with it, experience it and feel it, sometimes we get to know ourselves better. Sometimes we need that silence and solitude to connect with our inner beings, our spiritual selves, because other times in life, we're too busy to pay attention or to focus. And so this quiet and solitude offered that growth. And they also suggest that you don't regret what you don't have, right? Because in its absence, can you go back to the previous slide, please? When there are things you don't have, and that's certainly true during COVID, where we didn't have a lot of things that we used to have, but also, again, think about MS and the ways that MS changes lives or takes things away. In the absence of those things that have been important, you can rediscover some of the values of those things that were important to you and that you have had to leave behind, or that you might be able to recover or discover for the first time. And certainly any of you who've been to can-do programs have heard us talk about embracing the opportunity to do old things in different ways that you might never have thought of before, but also trying new things that are brand new experiences that you never tried. So once again, these wise young adults pointed out a truth that's important for all of us, regardless of COVID. Next slide, please. The second study I came across sort of ties into things that Mandy will be talking about in a minute, but it really ties together two things that I think are critically important for all of you living with MS and not to keep in mind. We know that depression is a very common symptom of MS. It is hardwired into changes in the brain and the immune system, making it a very common symptom. As a sidebar, depression is also common in support partners, not just of people with MS, but in the broader support partner community. So this slide is really for all of you who are listening. When people are depressed and that depression is not effectively managed, it increases a person's risk of vascular conditions. And that includes high blood pressure and cholesterol, and also increased risk of diabetes. These are very, very common in the US population as a whole, but they are particularly common in people with MS, even at the time of diagnosis, when we know that more comorbid health conditions are going on along with MS. And any of these vascular conditions, as we all know, can contribute to a shortened lifespan, right? In addition, we know from some really good research in the epidemiological literature, vascular conditions can hasten disease progression in people with MS. So there's actually a relationship between these vascular conditions and how the MS disease process evolves. And they can also shorten the lifespan of a person with MS. So these two things, depression and vascular conditions, are tied together in a very intricate and interesting way, but they give us a very good direction on how we should focus on self-care. If we diagnose and treat depression quickly and adequately, that can reduce a risk of vascular conditions. That's a win. When we diagnose and treat vascular conditions, we can prolong life and slow the progression of MS. And the best news of all is that both depression and vascular conditions are highly manageable. There's not a big mystery about this. We have very good treatment and wellness and behavioral strategies that people can use to manage both depression and vascular conditions, which makes it a win-win. So with that, I want to turn it over to Mandy because she's going to share with us at least one of the ways where you can have an impact on those vascular conditions.
Thank you, Roz. Hi, everyone. Roz is right. In fact, physical activity and exercise is one of the most well-supported ways that we can make improvements on in our vascular health. So I want to start by first redefining what physical activity is, what is physical activity, and more specifically, what is exercise. So physical activity is all the movement that you do throughout the day. So this can be playing with your children, folding your laundry, making your bed, walking to and from your car. All of that is physical activity. Also under that umbrella is exercise, or the structured movement that you do throughout the day. All of that movement counts. All of that movement counts towards these recommendations that you see on the screen. So the current recommendations for people living with MS is to aim for 150 minutes of moderate intensity exercise and/or physical activity per week. If you feel like you want to pick up the pace a little bit, you can pursue that 75-minute goal or some blend or combination of both. Now, many of you, myself included, might say, holy smokes, like that's a lot of time, that requires a lot of energy, that could be really hard to achieve. And some of these barriers, and this list is certainly not all encompassing, but some of those barriers could be time, it might be your MS fatigue, it might be motivation, or just simply putting on your exercise clothes and getting started can be really difficult sometimes. So these barriers, among others, can be some of the reasons why it's difficult to achieve those recommendations that exist. Fortunately, in 2021, there was a pretty significant amount of emerging research to support periodic exercise. And in the next slide here, I'll let Sarah switch us over. That supports the idea that periodic or intermittent exercise may be just as effective as continuous exercise. And what's exciting is that there was a research paper that was a pretty large group of folks, and this was in the general population, that participated in intermittent bouts of exercise sprinkled throughout their day, 10 minutes or less in duration. And they compared that group to a group that did more continuous exercise. And the good news is that both groups showed improvement that were equally as effective on their health. And when some of the factors that they were able to measure included their cardiovascular fitness, improved cholesterol, improved high blood pressure, also improved insulin sensitivity, among others. But the point is that this is another option for you if sometimes those large chunks of exercise seem like a lot of effort. So the two approaches that you can consider if you want to pursue periodic exercise are the HIIT approach, or the high intensity interval training. HIIT always seems a little intimidating to me, but high intensity interval training is what that HIIT stands for, or exercise snacks. And we'll go into each of these a little bit deeper in a bit. So next slide. So let's talk about exercise snacks first. Exercise snacks are really designed to help you stay active consistently or reduce your sedentary behaviors. So it's really a variety of exercise in any of the different categories of exercise that can be completed throughout the day. So it could be flexibility, it could be balance, it could be stretching and cardiovascular. It can be anything. And some examples are listed there. Now, the cool thing is Can Do MS has really taken charge of the exercise snack realm. And thanks so much, Anna, for putting that in the chat. We have a really great collection of exercise snacks that you guys can go online. That link's in the chat box. And check some of those out and use them as a tool to help keep you moving and keep you active and helping you to reach those recommended guidelines and those goals per week. So exercise snacks are one way to approach this intermittent training. The other one, as I mentioned, is high intensity interval training. And this is more focused on cardiovascular and cardiorespiratory fitness, I would say a bit more than the other categories of exercise. It really focuses on short bouts of incredibly, and I emphasize incredibly, high intensity exercise, alternated with a series of lighter movements or less intense movements. And we'll talk a little bit more about this one in particular. So next slide. So how to HIIT to be fit? What do we know? What is some of the current research suggesting? In preclinical or animal models of animals who have MS, who have been given a treatment that produces MS, they, with 6 weeks of high intensity interval training, were able to demonstrate improved biomarkers for maintaining myelination, which is really encouraging, right? If you can engage in a particular approach of exercise and have greater maintenance of myelination, that's certainly encouraging. But again, in animal models. There's also research to suggest that people, and this is people with all ability levels, were able to reduce their relapse rate over a 24-week period of participation in high intensity interval training. So very encouraging research there. This has been demonstrated to be somewhat effective in patients, both inpatient and outpatient settings. And that's specifically relevant because that means if someone is in an inpatient setting, they are likely have a greater involvement and different ability levels than, say, someone who comes into an outpatient setting. So again, that kind of implies and encourages that this may be applicable to a broad audience of people living with MS. Those last two bullets are a couple of articles pulled together that high intensity interval training can be helpful for improving your cardiovascular fitness and your glucose and insulin sensitivity. And all of this can be done with really minimal obstacles and minimal adverse reactions. Specifically, pain was the only one that was called out because, again, you're pushing yourself at a pretty aggressive and high intensity, which we'll move into here shortly. I'll explain that a little more. So in the next slide, while it's encouraging and exciting to see some progress in a different area of exercise, there are probably more questions that have yet to be answered and clarified. So while we do have some evidence to support the potential appropriateness for all abilities and stages of MS, I would argue that we need a little bit more. Those studies are quite small and we need a broader knowledge of a broader application of this type of approach. We do know some positive cardiovascular effects, but again, we need to see those more broadly, larger studies. Very little evidence has been outlined to support or describe the impact that this type of exercise training could have on MS symptoms specifically. I can speak more anecdotally that some patients of mine who have participated in this, they most notably describe improvements in their fatigue. So they're not as exhausted after their exercise program as they would have done if they would have done 10 or 20 minutes on the stationary bike. They're doing 5 to 8 minutes of high intensity interval training, and they feel that high, if you will, that you can get from exercise, but it didn't wipe them out as much, which is interesting. But again, research to support those types of patient-reported measures would be important to pursue. We don't know the extent that high-intensity interval training could have on neuroprotection or any anti-inflammatory effects, or just generally, can it influence the process of neurodegeneration in MS at all? So that would be interesting to continue to explore, and I think there are some papers that will likely be published in the near future about that. And overall, challenges related to adherence, the different modes of or types of exercise that you could do to participate in high intensity interval training. Many of these papers include people who are using an arm bike or a stationary bike, and there's really not much beyond that, which I think that would be interesting to explore given the fact that many people don't always have access to a stationary bike or an arm bike for that matter. So adherence, how do you get people to stick with this? Types of exercises, and then certainly injury risk and intensity. So we want to make sure that people are doing this safely if they're going to be pushing themselves to this extent. So the last question of intensity, I want to dive in a little bit further in the next slide. So we've mentioned intensity. We've mentioned that this really pushes people to their max. So this is a rating of perceived exertion scale, and if you've participated in Can Do MS programs, we often talk about this and refer to this. This is a scale that reflects your perception of how hard that you're pushing yourself during exercise. So if you're at rest or sleeping, it would be 0 or 1. Whereas if you're really pushing yourself and you're trying to push yourself as if you were participating in a high intensity interval training program, you would be more in that 8 to 10 effort range. But the number correlates to how you feel while you're exerting yourself during this exercise. Now, this is unique to each person. So for example, Roz is in significantly better shape than me. So her 4 out of 10 might feel much different than my 4 out of 10. And that's okay, because again, this is unique to you as a person. So next slide. So you're thinking, okay, this is interesting. This is something that I may actually want to kind of think about and pursue. With many things, when you're starting something new, particularly an exercise program, I would really encourage you to talk with your healthcare team. So maybe talk with your neurologist, talk with your nurse practitioner, maybe check in with your PT or a personal trainer who understands MS. Check in with those folks first to make sure you're safe, to help identify what types of exercise would be good for you, and honestly, how you can fit it into your day. Second, become very comfortable with that RPE scale. Really start to internalize, what is an 8 out of 10 to me? What is a 9 out of 10? What does that feel like? And am I comfortable with feeling that intensity for short bouts of time in order to get these benefits? So that RPE scale will be a tool that's very important to understand and internalize. And lastly, the recommendation right now, many of these studies, they did not do high intensity interval training every day. They generally did it 3 times a week. So I would encourage you to avoid that on consecutive days until more research would suggest otherwise. So I'll pull back the curtain completely and let you guys see an example of a high intensity interval training routine. So a warm up of 2 to 3 minutes at that intensity or that feeling of a 2 to 3 out of 10. Shift up into that HIIT gear for 20 seconds, really pushing yourself to an 8 to 10 out of 10 on that exertion scale. and then shifting back down for 2 to 3 minutes at a lower intensity. And then repeating that series for a period of time, or excuse me, for a period of repetitions, and then progressing to a cool down. This would be an example of a high intensity interval training routine. And again, this is not universally applicable to everyone, and it could be modified to a way that's accessible and doable and appropriate, most importantly, safe for you. So I think what's exciting is I pause and reflect, because in the my 16 short years in working in MS, you know, I started and had people who were very skeptical of exercise, still at that time, skeptical of exercise and the benefits of exercise, let alone talking about pushing people with MS to these more significant intensities. So I really want to give a nod actually to our founder, Jimmy Huga, because without the encouragement and the support of the Huga Center, which is now Can Do MS, back in 1996, publishing those papers that say, hey, the importance of exercise with MS is there. It's not only safe, but it's helpful for people with MS, and encouraging that and setting that bar wouldn't lay the groundwork for all of this research that has really followed in exercise and multiple sclerosis. So kudos to Jimmy. I'm sure he's smiling as he's listening to all of us tonight. So thank you. I'll pass it back over to Kathy.
Thanks, Mandy. Well, you know, thank you everyone for listening. We've, you know, tried to share some new research with you around this area of wellness, and I hope you heard some new things, and I hope you have some questions for us. We're here to answer any questions you have, and I hope this gave you a little food for thought, so to speak.
Yeah, so we got lots of great questions in the question box. Let me just go through a few here. We had a really great question from Dana, who was talking about, can you talk about weight gain during the pandemic and how that might affect people with MS differently, and how that might impact or it cause increased depression with additional health concerns. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be a Roz question.
So I will give a start to that. I think that has been a common concern during the pandemic, with increased stress, increased isolation, some boredom, all the triggers that can sometimes get us to overeat. Fortunately, in January, we have a lot of programming to help people sort of reset their eating habits, eating goals, with some in-depth information from our registered dietitian. But I think the part of this question that I really want to answer is that you need to give yourself some grace. This has been a hard time. And if you feel that you have put on some weight, the point is not to focus on its dangers for you. It's just to remind yourself that you can reset your habits a little bit. I would recommend consulting with a dietitian who can help you create some SMART goals around how to begin to get back on track with your habits. Be patient with yourself. Habits change is hard. But that's what I would recommend you do. Give yourself grace and consult with a dietitian.
Great, thanks, Roz. Another great question. Does the Wahls diet affect MS symptoms other than fatigue?
That's a really good question. You know, they did a lot of different tests in that study that I told you about. Other things that it improved was memory. The issue was that it wasn't just the Wahls diet, right? It was really the Swank diet and those on the Wahls diet. It did improve other symptoms in addition to fatigue. So cognition was one thing. Quality of life was mentioned by many people, but it was the primary outcome for the study. So that's really the, you know, where you can hang your hat after a study. The primary outcome was fatigue. That's why I emphasized it that much. But I do think, you know, the paper has been published, so it's accessible for anyone to read. And the idea was that this is a stepping off point to say diet can change symptoms in MS. And I think that's really encouraging. And I wouldn't, if you're interested in the Wahls Paleolithic diet, I would definitely, encourage you to give it a try. I would be careful, right? This is what you eat is very important. So you don't want to be missing any nutrients. So I would do it under the guidance of your physician or consulting with a dietitian, just to be sure you really are still getting the necessary nutrients that you need.
Mm-hmm. And we did have a couple of questions about the light therapy, about where people could maybe procure these products, and if you could kind of MacGyver your own at home with like daylight light bulbs.
A really good question. I don't know that I have all of the answers. I will tell you that you can buy these light therapy boxes, I think on Amazon. So I don't think they're that hard to find. They vary in price pretty dramatically from what I saw. I think there are certain, you probably could rig something up at your home. You want to understand enough about what the frequency of the light that has been used in the studies, and make sure that's what you're using if you are going to go on your own and try to develop something. But again, and how the other important caveat is how you position the device. It doesn't need to stare straight into your eyes, because that could hurt your eyes, but it needs to have access to your eyes, because that's where the light is absorbed. So I would encourage someone to look at the details in the studies. I'd be happy to share any of those papers with you. I can go through Sarah, or Sarah can share my email, and I'd be happy to share those papers if you'd like details.
Great, thanks, Kathy. Mandy, we have a question about where someone could maybe look at some examples of high intensity interval training exercises. Are there any websites or videos that people can watch to start learning about it?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Specific to MS, the short answer is there aren't any out there. However, a simple Google search of high intensity interval training will give you a menu of different options and approaches. But again, specific to MS, they're just published in these papers. There aren't any videos. But similarly with Kathy, I can share some of those papers for people to have those resources. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Mandy.
Yep.
And I think we are just about out of time, but I do want to ask this one last question. If there has been any new research that's come out about MS and aging regarding taking DMTs, and if there's an appropriate time to stop taking them, if there's been any updates about that.
So I will respond to that one. I think that although some people will be told that it's okay to stop once they reach a certain chronological age, like 60 or 65 or 70, I've heard people say their doctors have mentioned different ages. I think what the data are saying is that you really need to be disease activity free for at least 10 years. And what that means, and maybe more, it could be up to 20 years, because you don't know whether you're disease activity free because you've been on a DMT or because the disease process has naturally slowed with time. So they want you to be disease activity free, meaning no new lesions on MRI, no new symptoms, and no relapses. And I think I'm going to correct myself. It was more than 10 years that they wanted that to happen before you went off, because we don't want you to lose protection that you need. So.
Can I add to that? I know there's a study ongoing right now. I think Dr. Corboy in Colorado is studying that very question. When do you get off therapy? When is it safe to do that? So I think, again, going back to the point of this seminar was really to emphasize, research in these areas. And again, I think that's the safe way. We need to understand when is it safe to do that. And I think, there will be more answers on coming soon as this study, at least completes.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your great knowledge tonight. We appreciate you guys. I'm a little ahead of myself here. So we hope that you guys will join us again. Again, this is our last program of 2021. I can't believe it, but we have a full lineup for 2022. So lots of great opportunities for you guys to engage. We also hope that you'll join us on social media. We're on all of the things that the kids are on these days. So we hope that you will join us and talk to us over there. I do want to remind you to please register for the year's programs on our website. Our next webinar in January, on January 5th, is going to be on diet and nutrition. The whole month is on diet and nutrition. I know lots of you had questions, great questions about diet and nutrition. So we're going to kick off the new year with a webinar on eating healthy and eating well with MS and actually enjoying it. So I'm really excited about that one. So again, make sure you go to the website and register for the whole year of programs, and you can do that for each one of our 3 programs. You can go ahead and just register for the whole year so you don't have to think about it. That'll be over at the website, and this presentation will be recorded and archived on our website tomorrow, so you can access it if you want to listen to it again. Thanks so much for everybody that came tonight. We really appreciate all of you. And shout out to our sponsors and everybody who helped make these programs possible. Please take a moment to complete the survey. It really helps us out a lot. Please share with us your feedback and let us know what you think. It really helps us to shape what the topics are going to look like for next year. So thanks so much for joining us tonight. Thanks so much to our awesome presenters. I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your evening. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.